Hi there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cloud-Based Mayhem. I've been meaning to do this one for a long time. This would definitely fall into our Legend series, but Chuck Smith, who has been running our tandem operation here since the beginning of time here in Sun Valley, has cut his teeth back in the late 80s, and I got to go through this sheet of names here in a second, but Chuck has just been incredibly instrumental in the flying scene here for the last 40 years. Has taught pretty much everybody who's come through, who was anybody at some time. And as we talk about a little bit in the show, there's something pretty special about Sun Valley. I believe somewhere around 50%, maybe even a little bit more, of all the U.S. athletes who have competed over the decades in the Red Bull X Alps have cut their teeth here in Sun Valley, including Will Gadd, Nate Scales, Mitch Riley, of course, Hansa Rosmanek, myself, Willie Cannell, goes on and on. Pretty special place for a lot of reasons, but Chuck picked this spot to lay down in his tandem business, and he's been going hard. He's been super passionate about it forever, all these years, and this was his last year. He's going to close up shop after this summer. He's still probably going out and doing his Ghana thing, which you'll hear about in the show, but that's it for Sun Valley Paragliding. It has been a staple here for a very long time, and he has had the great fortune of flying with tons and tons of very recognizable names over the last 30 plus years. And let me just get into some of these. I mean, he got started back east in the late 80s under the tutelage of John Bouchard, and flew with his brother out there back east, Dixon White, the Yates brothers, Michael Gaudu, Philip Renudua, sorry, I had the name wrong, Granger Banks, a bunch of skydivers, Peter Zimmerelli, the Domenico brothers, and then Bob Schick, Bob England, Ken Bear, Todd Bibler, who I need to get on the show desperately. A lot of these people I do. Amy Brothers, Lee Kaiser, Chris Santa Croce, Jimmy Grossman, who died in a kayaking accident here a couple years ago. I miss him. Joe Gudzinski, Scott Gressett, Chris Blatchley, Greg Kelly, the Ferguson brothers, Josh Cohn, of course, Zach Housington, Mark Shipman, Jan Stenstavold, Pierre Boulot with Sup Air, Xavier Raymond, Uli Weissmeyer, Bruce Goldsmith, Richard Gallone, Robbie Whittle, John Pendry, John Heine, that on the show, and Robbie. Always meant to get Richard Gallone on, and unfortunately don't have that opportunity anymore. But he taught a lot of the climbing guides because, of course, as we've all known, this was originally seen as a descent tool, and now using it, of course, as an ascent tool in the mountains. But he taught a bunch of climbers, Dave Carl, the Grant brothers, Jeff Swayze, of course, Bill Belcourt, and worked for a number of different manufacturers. It just took him by the reins. He moved to Europe chasing it. He summited Aconcagua in '89 to attempt to fly off, which turned into a total disaster. You'll hear some about that. He did some stuff down at Kitty Hawk, and had a crash out there in the trees. I'm not sure we talked about that in this show, but maybe. He competed in the '89 World Championships. He was our first U.S. national champion, which you'll hear about what that was all about down at the Point back in the day. He worked with the Smith brothers and worked down at Mount Holm. Did tandems out with Dick Jackson out in Aspen, was a co-owner there for quite a while before he made his way to Sun Valley and set up shop here. He talks about Hobbs and going down there and chasing records with Larry Tudor back in the day, and did a bunch of stuff in Europe and back and forth, and at this point had completely given up what he was planning on doing with his life and just stuck with flying, and then had a crazy accident that he thinks might have been triggered by an earthquake out near Reno. Talks about life in a pre-accident days and post-accident days. Chuck talks about the World Cup in Japan and landing in the city at goal and watching Mitch McAleer go in and out of the clouds and some of his insane loops. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with this. It was nice to have him at the house and do it in person. We don't get to do that very often. And it was nice to just finally do this show with someone who's been so instrumental in free flight and so instrumental to all of us here in Sun Valley. Of course, many of those pilots I mentioned are scattered all around the world these days, but had a lot of fun. Some great stories. I think you'll enjoy it. Cheers. Chuck, I don't get to do too many of these in person. Welcome to my house. We've been meaning to do this for 10 years, but that just gives us more time for more stories. How are you, buddy?
Doing all right. Hey, that's thanks for the invitation. It's really great to be here. So,
well, this is a crazy time. You've been the king of our mountain for forever. Way before.
But that title's yours, man. You got the distance record up there. Come on. So.
Well, we got to spend some time. I'm so glad you made this list of all the legends and all the people you've flown with and been around over the decades. But let's rewind the clock to the beginning. And you got into this with your brother, I understand. How did this all begin? What year? How old? All that funny data stuff.
So, I got into paragliding, I think, like a lot of the other early pilots. We came in through the climbing community. And for me, I just kind of fell into it. I grew up on Cape Cod. And actually, there's a rich history on Cape Cod of gliding back to the, late 1800s, early 1900s. Actually in the 20s, the Germans had a glider school out there in my hometown of Wellfleet, which is out towards the end of Cape Cod, on the far end of the arm out there. And we have these really high sand dune bluffs. And, and I think there were some records set there. I forgot who set it. It was on the bay side. And that was second only, I think, to the Wright brothers. I think their record at the time was about 8 minutes, and this was the first time somebody exceeded 15 minutes in the air off some sand dunes. Actually, a sand dune called Corn Hill, and it's where a lot of people don't know. We'll stay on paragliding, but we're gonna deviate a little bit. That's all right.
Deviation's good.
So people know the general story about the Pilgrims coming over on the Mayflower and going to Plymouth and landing on Plymouth Rock and all that. Well, that's all pretty contrived. But before they actually went to Plymouth, they were hanging out in my hometown for about a month in the Outer Cape, looking for water and this and that. And they came across this stash of corn that belonged to the local Wampanoag Indians. And they stole it.
Of course they did.
And so anyway, that's why it's called Corn Hill. And they came across that. So besides that history, that goes way back. But there's a lot of gliding history out there.
Interesting.
And so just a mile or two from my house where I grew up is the launch site, and also where they had the Germans had that glider school and so on. And so the main flying site, a lot of people in the U.S. flying community will know Whitecrest Beach. That's where people, if they fly on Cape Cod, that's where you launch from. And I'd been watching the hang gliders fly out there for years. And I was like, I got to do that. I got to get one. I got to figure out how to do that. And so I was actually saving up some money to buy a hang glider. And then I think it was late 1986, early 1987. I'd been climbing for, 5 or 6 years. And I read in...
And by climbing, mountaineering?
Yeah, I started rock climbing, then got into ice climbing, and then mountaineering. It's tough being a mountaineer living on Cape Cod.
Yeah.
We made it work.
Hillineering.
And so I came across this article in Climbing Magazine written by John Bouchard. And John, of course, is a legend in the climbing community, certainly in the New England climbing community. And it was an article about how he came across paragliders in France. And it was even before I think that the word paragliding existed. We most of the time we used the word parapente, the French term.
Sure.
And as soon as I saw the image of those guys flying in France, I said, that's it. I got to do that. Because the main thing about it was, and what we believed in the early days, that every mountain climber would have one of these as part of his normal equipment,
Sure.
as a descent
tool.
Yeah. So I said, that's it. I got to get one of those. So I actually drove up to New Hampshire one time with my buddy Mike Nagel, my climbing buddy at the time, and just stopped by John Bouchard's house unannounced one Saturday morning. I'm like, hey, I want to buy a paraglider.
Really?
He was making them. It was Farrell Corporation was the company. He already had I knew his company, Wild Things, and he was making, climbing gear, harnesses and, sewn runners and so on. In fact, Bill Belcourt was working for him. So,
right.
And that's when I first met Bill. It was about a year later after I purchased my glider from
You're
them.
kidding me. So this is kind of late 87, 86?
Yeah. So I'm not sure when Bill was there. I met Bill certainly in 88.
Okay.
So in 87, I got the glider, and it was, you acquired your paraglider a little bit differently back in those days. I mean, there were really not much for instructors. I went there, woke up Mark Twight, who's a famous climber, working for John at the time. He was living out in his cabin. Told him I wanted to buy a paraglider. And in those days, you just told him what colors you wanted on your cells. And
9 or 11.
Yeah, 9 or 11. I think 7 and 8, the small ones. And so they sent it to you, UPS. You got it in the box. There was understanding. No, not understanding. I forgot what it was. It was a book on the weather, written by Dennis Pagan, but it wasn't Understanding the Sky. It was a different book. Yep, that preceded that. I can't recall. I still have it somewhere, and a video. It wasn't really an instructional video. It just showed people flying. And launching
Do
and so
this.
on. Yeah, so and it's VHS, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, you pull on that thing, you pull this up, you hold there, and went out to the sand dunes with my, and we flew in our climbing harnesses back then. There was nothing else to fly.
Of course,
and
just some webbing.
So it took me about half an hour to figure out how to get myself in the air, but when I did, and I know a lot of people will appreciate this. When they had their very first taste of flight, I still think of it today.
It's always the best one.
I was only like 3 feet in the air for like 3 seconds, 4 seconds at the most.
We chase that feeling forever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That sensation. I don't know. Everybody will understand that.
Totally.
And you never forget it.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And
wow.
I just fulfilled the dream just now. It was amazing. Yeah.
And your brother was with you?
So my brother, so I'm out there. He was still in school, and my brother Rob and I, we're kind of like the Wright brothers out on the sand dunes, but not nearly as smart because we nearly killed each other. I don't know how many times. Just the performance of those gliders were so bad. You're always on the edge of either soaring or getting blown back. I mean, that window was so narrow, and then I just can't believe that we didn't really get hurt with the stupid stuff that we did. But we flying in just tremendously strong winds, and him holding on to me and holding on to my ankles and getting airborne and letting go, and he couldn't hold on any longer. Or we'd go to the beaches where there weren't sand dunes, but the wind was onward. It was wind, and or windward, and so we do a lot of just tying a rope onto somebody, just up you go, flying you like a kite.
Right.
And I'd use my climbing harness and like a figure 8 belay device to basically, anchor whoever's in the air, and make hand loops in the ropes. And we didn't blow up any gliders. I was surprised that we didn't, but we learned about lockout. That's for sure.
Just towing by pulling on somebody?
Just by flying them like a kite,
Yeah.
just anchoring with a rope, and the pilot just getting too far off to the side, and I
Wham.
remember my brother almost hit a pier or
Ooh.
a breakwater, actually, giant boulders. I was like, how am I going to explain to Mom that I just killed her second son? But we survived, and yeah, here we are.
When I watch those videos of the early days, the stoke combined with the absurdity is
yeah.
really compelling. I mean, you just watch you guys going, that was epic, and you're talking a 4-second sledder, just everybody's in the dismantling it all. I'm talking about the hang gliders, but dismantling and putting it all back together, and just the, how fortunate we are now. Our first flight could be off Baldy for 20 minutes.
Yeah. It was really fun to be part of, and it was all, it was really John Bouchard that really in that climbing community in New England, at least that I was in, that clique. And it was exactly what you just said. It was that stoke. We were so excited, and it was a lot of the climbing community in North Conway, where John Bouchard lived and where he had his company, and it was like Joe Lentini and the Grant brothers, Jeff Swayze, and another person that's still around, Dave Carl. They were all climbing guides up there, and we were all just like, we did climb like White Horse Cliff. It was this big slab at the top that we'd launch from. You couldn't screw up. There's no way you're gonna stop. And we'd land down at Echo Lake down there. And I remember we'd be timing ourselves. I'm like, wow, I got 1 minute and 57 seconds in the air. Like, wow, I got 2 minutes and 10 seconds. I got lift. But it was none of us really knew much in those days. Nothing about meteorology, aerodynamics, or anything, but it was that level of excitement and stoke.
Yeah. Nate's got this great story from here that I think his first flight off Greenhorn, was that he walked into the ski shop and the guy said, "Hey, you want to go paragliding?" And whoever he was asking said no, and Nate said, "I'll go." And he goes and takes him off Greenhorn, and he lands, and the guy goes, "Okay, well, now you know as much as I know."
I do.
I just love it.
Yep, that's exactly it. Well,
just figuring it out.
What parallels that a bit too is that, so when I got into flying, and then I was going to go back to school that fall.
Back east?
Yep, and finish my degree. I'd been out of college for a couple of years. I'd done a couple of years of college. Was about to go back, and
what were you studying?
Television production, photojournalism.
Oh, that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
And so I was about to go back, and then that's about the time when I discovered the paragliding, and then my buddy Mike said, "Hey, listen, I'm going to Switzerland to go climbing this fall." And I'm like, "Screw school. I'm going back to Europe." And
much to the delight of your parents, I'm sure.
Yeah, they were like, "Okay," but so I said that to lead to that parallel that I mentioned before, is that after a year in Europe flying, because I'd been an exchange student in Germany in my for a month or two during my senior year in high school, and we're still best friends to this day.
Wow.
40 odd years later. But so I had a base camp in Europe to stay there, work, and then work for a month or two, and then take off for a few weeks to Switzerland to go flying and climbing and et cetera. So after that year, I came back to the States.
Would you say back then was your jam more climbing or was it more flying?
Flying took over from the climbing.
Okay. Yeah.
Not right away.
Yeah.
Because I wanted it as a descent tool.
Yeah.
But over the years, it was less climbing and more flying.
Yeah.
That's why I tell climbers, they're like, "Yeah, I want to get on." I'm like, "Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. You won't climb anymore. You'll just want to fly." And
so true. It's so true.
So I had come back from Europe pretty much dead broke, but I was so excited about flying, because I called up John Bouchard and just said, "Hey, John, I've been flying for a year. I want to be involved in paragliding somehow. I'll cut the material, I'll stitch the material, I'll help build these things, I'll do anything. He says, well, why don't you start teaching? I'm like, what?
But I don't know anything, man.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I don't know anything. He's like, well, you've been flying for a year. You know more than anyone else around here. And I'm like, okay. He's like, come on up, spend the weekend with me. So I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, I mean, it's like, John Bouchard. Oh,
Yeah,
I mean, like, I'm not worthy. And, spent some time with him that weekend, and we climbed together, and he sent me home with a bunch of gliders, and I instantly had a flight school.
Wow.
And so I started teaching out there on the dunes.
So is this 90?
That's 1988.
1988, you had your first
Yeah.
school.
Yep.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like when they hand you a baby. I learned this when they hand you a baby at the hospital, and you go, wait, where's the manual? What you're just sending me home with this thing? I don't know what I'm doing.
That's right. Where's the instruction manual?
Where's the instruction manual? Man?
Yeah. But, yeah. And then, we spent some time with some California pilots and started we were just like sponges and,
Yeah.
just learning everything you could from everybody you flew with.
I'm looking at your list here. Bob Schick, Bob England, Ken Baer, John Bouchard, obviously Todd Bibler. I got to get him on the show.
Yeah.
Amy Brothers, Lee. Who are the circus performers?
Yeah. So that's what was interesting. There was definitely, at least my perception from that time was that, the vast majority of the people that are involved in paragliding in those very early days was the climbing community. And then there was this other kind of subset of where they were circus performers. People like Cirque Topol. That's why his name was Cirque, after circus, and Dixon White was involved. Dixon, God bless him.
Yeah.
I wish he was still around.
Yeah.
And Mike Godot, he and I used to juggle together on launch all the time. But he performed a lot with Lance Burton, who was kind of like I think he's a retired magician now, but he had a big act in Vegas for many, many years. He was kind of like a David Copperfield. And I'm trying to think who else. Well, Granger Banks, I think, was doing that stuff, circus stuff. And Philippe Renaudin, he was a French guy out on Long Island, one of the early guys. He came here as a circus performer, amusement park stuff, and then he was involved in like F1, car racing and stuff like that. But so you had this weird combination of climbers and
Circus
performers.
That's awesome.
And it was so fun. And then there was the skydiving element too. People like Peter Zimmerle and the Domenico brothers, they had Excalibur. And you had the Yates brothers, Jim and John, they had their climbing company making gear. And so you had all these different factions. And then there was a whole faction of pilots up in the Northwest, Shipmen and so on. I didn't know them that as well, but it was just interesting to see how these different locations.
It's kind of interesting that still totally exists.
Yeah,
the Frenchies, that's what they call themselves, the Frenchies. They do all the high lining and the playing the instruments and basing and wingsuit and flying, and it's always the French, isn't it? They're pushing this stuff, but
they are, yeah.
I mean,
well, of course, and that gets back to like the stuff I do in Ghana. Until he passed away just a few years ago, Giraud Besson used to live in Togo, and he joined us in Ghana, and he was one of the 3 original Frenchmen that were out there running down slopes with their skydiving rigs that really, I think, turned paragliding into a sport.
Right.
Depends on how you perceive the different area. I mean, the British were parascending, and Dave Barish was running down slopes with his single, those multi-lobed kind of single surface things that he had, but I think it was really the French that they really got it going.
They like to have fun, don't they?
They do.
Yeah, they like to have fun. They like to push it. Gosh, look at all these names, buddy. It's incredible. They're just, it's so, what a journey that you've gotten to cross paths with so
You
many
know,
wonderful characters.
I've been so fortunate to fly with so many legendary pilots that are just giants, you know.
And how did it go from instructing back east? How'd you end up out here? And if we're jumping too far ahead, just slow me down. This is all I want to. Yeah, take your time.
No, yeah. I was teaching. A lot of it was, you know, kind of clandestine because it's national seashore out there. And, you know, what we needed out there was easter winds and the east winds for most of it. And that's pretty rare. But then I started traveling out west. We were flying in the Owens. You know, it gets a little blurry. I remember John telling me, hey, you need to come out here with me. Because we were meeting in the Owens, I think for like a friendly competition, but it was also kind of a meeting when we started putting together the APA, the American Paragliding Association, which preceded USPA.
Okay.
And so it was myself and a lot of those early pilots, and we were just, you know, and Fred Stockwell was really spearheading, I think, a lot of it. And
were guys like, not Larry didn't cross over to paragliding until much more recently, but Larry Tudor. But were the hangies already coming over at this point, or was that still they were still pretty in their group? And
I think not too many crossed over yet.
Okay.
I think when the performance started getting better, knowledge started getting a little bit better, then more of them started crossing over. But it didn't take, you know, it was a couple of years, a few years later.
Yeah.
But yeah, we all just got together and started coming up with a pilot proficiency program and things like that. Just kind of, you know, the seminal start of the APA, and that was exciting, you know. But once again, I was like, I don't know what we're doing.
Right.
We just make this stuff up as we go along, you know. And then was it 88? I guess, yeah. We had the first U.S. Nationals. I drove cross country with my brother. My dad let us borrow the car and drove all the way to Utah. And of course,
in the first Nationals, you got to talk about this. What was it? How did you win? Because you won. You were our first national champion.
Yeah. You know, and didn't screw up. It wasn't much for cross country in those days. You know, it was out there at the point. I mean, we were flying. It was basically speed over a course, and some duration, extra bonus points for, you know, if you were spot landing after you finished your flight, things like that. And
so is that the point?
Yep.
North side. And it was kind of an endurance thing, right? I mean, you just stayed in the air longer than everybody else.
Endurance. And a lot of it was just speed over course. We had, you know, get to this point, that point, and just who did it the fastest and stuff. And we got lucky. And, you know, but the cool thing that did was kind of open up some windows for me, or some doors rather. And I think sometime it wasn't there, but it was at one of those sessions when we were getting together, kind of coming up with the APA stuff, that I met Greg Smith. And so he was importing Comet gliders at the time, and then he was one of the primary designers of the original Katana made by UP.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I had done some work together. We had taught a course down in, I think it was 1990. We went down to Kitty Hawk and taught a course down there. And so we worked together really well. We flew together. And he said, hey, you want a job with UP? Come on out here. So that's when I moved out west.
So you're at this stage, you never did go back to school. At this stage, your living or your survival is flying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Life happens when we're making other plans. Right?
Yeah, right.
So, paragliding just took over. And I was really been fortunate for a long time that way.
Wow.
But, I'm trying to remember.
Is your brother at this point still into it?
He's still flying, not much, you know. He was out here this summer. I would have liked to put him. He flew tandem with my buddy Eduardo.
Oh, cool.
But I wouldn't feel comfortable sending him off the mountain.
Okay.
But off the sand dunes on a calm day, still be fine. But you know, he's a Secret Service agent. He's he's got his hands full.
Yeah, he's busy. He's busy.
Used to be a respected position. But but he's getting ready to retire from there. And
but back then, was he still flying with you much, or was he already off on his career?
Off and on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
So this
but
for whatever reason, it grabbed you more. It was this. Was this was your thing.
Yeah, I was a little older, and he was still involved in school, high school, then into college, and he got there. We had some good fun flights together. Yeah. But I'm just trying to think else. Yeah, so before I actually moved out west, and Greg and I had done that clinic down at Kitty Hawk. It was funny because John Harris, he's still around. I don't know if he still owns Kitty Hawk Kites or not. But we went down there. We were all ready to, it's like, I know the dunes. I know them well. I'll be able to teach out here, no problem. We got out there, and they wouldn't let us fly. And we're like, what's going on? It was a surprise to John, to me, to Greg, and we're like, what's wrong? And where they fly out there, where the Wright brothers flew, and like I said, Kitty Hawk Kites, they still have their hang gliding school there. I'm assuming now they teach paragliding as well, but it's state park, and the North Carolina State Park said nope, there's no parachuting permitted in the state parks here, and we're like, it's not a parachute. It's a paraglider.
Right.
And they're like, nope, that's a parachute. We're like, the federal government considers us an ultralight and a type of hang glider. And they would not budge. So we had to do towing instead.
Really?
It worked out okay, but it wasn't the curriculum that we were certainly hoping for out there.
Yeah.
But I was just like, man, and that's kind of like the first time I kind of butt heads with the state government somewhere. It's like, man, just let us be. But,
one of the funniest experiences with that kind of a thing was with Santa Croce at the event center in Hood River. He came through on his way. Remember when you used to do all the towing up in Seattle on Lake Sammamish? And he was coming through Hood River on his way up to Seattle, and he called me up, and I had just done my instruction stuff with him. He said, hey, you want to do a couple bro tows? Yeah. And we went down to the event center, and it was just him in the boat, and he was literally hooking me up. And I had just watched the videos, but I'd never towed, and I was like, wait, don't you need to give me more instruction on this? And he's on his way running back to the boat, and a cop comes up. It wasn't a real cop. It was kind of a security guy. And he goes, hey, you can't do that here. And Santa Croce goes, you can't do what?
Exactly.
Yeah. And the guy goes, well, I don't know, whatever you're doing. And he goes, you don't actually know what we're doing, do you? And he goes, no, but I know you can't do it. And he goes, yeah, I'm going to run the risk that we can.
That's exactly the same thing happened to me on that trip.
Really?
Down to Nag's Head. So we finished up, and I was flying out of Norfolk, and I'm not sure why Greg wasn't with me. I think maybe his flight was earlier and I had a long delay prior to my flight. So I went down to Virginia Beach, and I was just on the beach ground handling. And so people were like, wow, what is that thing? I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, hey, is there like a hill or anything around here to fly off? And they're like, yeah, Trash Mountain. So it's an old, dump that they've covered in grass and everything, turned it into a park. And they have the state emblem on it. So I'm like, cool. So I went back there. I flew off the top, come down and land in the parking lot. They come out of the building. They're like, you can't do that here. I'm like, do what? That. It's
whatever that is.
Precisely the same thing. Yeah, they didn't know what the term was. I'm like, all right.
Show me the rules where you can't, because it's not in there.
That's right.
I guarantee it. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, yeah.
And then when you came out here, so you're at Nationals, you win Nationals at the point, was Utah home? Did you have a home, or were you just floating?
So, I was living still back on the Cape, moved out west.
Okay.
Took the job with UP. And so Greg and I were running
And is that Elsinore?
No, so Dick Cheney, I'm saying who else? So at the time, UP was primarily Japanese owned.
Yeah.
Mr. Isamura. And so we had our hang gliding production facility up in Mountain Green.
Okay.
which is at the Morgan County Airport. So you go up Weber Canyon from Ogden.
Okay.
In there, beautiful area.
Yeah.
And so we had our facility there. Greg and I were running the paragliding aspect of things, but we produced the hang gliders on the spot there. That's when we were making the TRX and so on, the first kind of production carbon fiber hang gliders. And of course Mitch Mackler was around. I spent a lot of time with Mitch, which was awesome. And so our paragliders, though, at the time were being manufactured in Korea at the Airman factory, and people will know the owner of that. That's Jin Song.
Yeah.
That's Jin Gliders, of course, now, but that was before he had his own company there, at least his own line of gliders. So he would manufacture the gliders, ship them over to us. I'd test fly each glider before I went out the door, and either by towing or foot launching, one or the other. And so we had UP Europe, we had UP in the U.S. up there at Mountain Green, and then UP University or over in Japan. So,
And was this a time that would mirror the early 70s with hang gliders, where there were just a ton of companies, tons of stoke, sales were great, the future looked incredible? Or was it different than because hang gliding was there like 60 companies or something early on? It was crazy.
There was in the States by this time I think Farrell had stopped. Bouchard had combined with ITV for a while. I think he was still producing at the time. The Yates brothers had Summit Magic. I don't know if they were still producing domestically. But it was definitely European-based, most of the companies that were still around.
Mm-hmm.
But the stoke was high,
Mm.
And Greg and I worked hard to build, a dealer network and get the best pilots in the country on our equipment,
Mm-hmm.
And we had Camelot for a while. It was really good,
Mm.
and trying to think. And then they started making some changes at the upper management, and that's when we decided it's time to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And Greg he started importing Adel, which I think most new pilots now know nothing about Adel.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Adel is it's as big as Ozone is now. I mean, that was the equipment
That
to
was
be on.
that was the one.
And it did a lot of sponsorship for pilots all over the world. And that's one thing I had to say. Working with Greg was awesome at UP. And Greg was really probably the first person to really seriously start just sponsoring pilots in the U.S.
Mm.
It changed the whole atmosphere here.
Right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, UP days were some good days. I did a lot of test flying and a lot of travel, a lot of competitions. I was really fired up in those days.
And so now things are really shifting towards XC and race to goal, or not yet?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Race to goal. And we didn't have flight computers or anything.
Yeah, sure. You're taking pictures. at the
You're taking
turn points.
pictures in those days.
Yeah.
You get your finger over the lens. Oh, no points for you, man. And of course, you had to be in the quadrant, the correct quadrant to photograph your turn point, and sometimes you're just getting your butt kicked in thermal turbulence as you're trying to take the picture. And you get this camera hanging around your neck, and it was different.
Yeah, slightly. Yeah, definitely.
But there were some good days, and the projects I got to work on were really fun, really interesting. Big trip to Europe to get our new gliders, their new prototypes through the DHV
Mm-hmm.
testing. That was a fun job. Doing load testing and flight testing, of course. And
And did they have a whole kind of I think of it as kind of an air turquoise system, but they had a whole, you'd force deflations and asymmetrics, and was it that kind of testing?
Yep.
Okay.
In the load testing we were doing, I forget what the facility was, somewhere in Bavaria. And so they had a vehicle pulling like a small trailer, and the test pilot, my job was for the load testing, they'd hook up the wing to, some weak links and go screaming down this tarmac and generate X amount of G's on this thing. And, the test pilot would then, fly the glider from a seated position in this trailer and to keep it up overhead correctly. And I think we were going to about 8 G's in those days. Maybe it was a little bit less. I can't quite remember exactly.
Jeez.
But basically you had to, the weak links had to fail before any line failed or any line attachment on the glider failed or any stitching, anything. You had to have 100%. You had 0 fails,
right, to
pass the load testing. And then of course, we were doing a lot of the flight testing, getting ready to go to the DHV. The weather was bad in Italy at the time in Lake Garda, so we ended up doing it, a lot of it in Monaco. And I look back, I'm like, man, how'd I ended up in the water? I mean, we didn't have a boat. So but a lot of my flight testing was over the ground. So it was, same thing.
Better than
full stalls, spins, everything, asymmetrics, everything we do today.
Wow.
So, yeah, I didn't get paid enough for that job.
But back then, I imagine you didn't care.
Man, I didn't care.
You were young and dumb. You're having a blast.
Fun. Yeah. But, there's all kinds of stories from that trip. I don't know which ones you want to hear.
Oh, yeah, the best ones.
There was a good one. Well, the cool thing on that trip, I got to work with Ernst Strobel.
Ooh.
And so he had come on to UP, and we were working on kind of the second generation of the Katana. In Europe, it was known as the Flash. And so one of the things we had to do, we were in Germany, with Ernst Schneider. He was the head of UP Europe at the time. So it was me and him, Monty Bell. I can't remember if Ernst Strobel was in the car with us or not. So we're going to Betzau, Austria, and for this weekend kind of trade show / symposium for manufacturers. So basically, all the different glider companies were going there for the weekend and just kind of showcasing our new gliders. So everything we had in the car with us was a prototype. We had maybe, 12 or 15 paragliders and a couple hang gliders, and everything was a prototype. It was unsellable in Europe. And so it's Friday night. We have to be in Betzau at like 6 or 7 in the morning because that's when they have this little glider ratio contest. Everyone's flying off the same point, see which glider goes the furthest, just the simple thing. And then we set up a stand that people could come in. You show us their flying credentials, and they could take our glider out for a test flight or whatever. It's like test driving a car, that type of thing. So we're at the border going into Austria. And we show up. It's like 11 o'clock at night. And we got to get to this place. And they stop us. And they're like, okay, where are you going? What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. And they look at all the gliders and they're like, you can't come in. And I was like, what? I've never been denied entrance into a European country, at least a Western European country. And they're like, yeah, you have all those gliders. We need a bond.
What?
Because, I'm like, why? He goes, well, you could sell them here. And we're like, they're unsellable.
Yeah.
They're prototypes. We're the company. We need to be at this location in the morning, first thing. We're going to totally screw up what we're doing. And they're like, nope. And, of course, it's like 10, 11 o'clock at night on a Friday. There's no banks open.
Right.
So we can't get a bond.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, because this is way before the Eurozone. You had to deal with this shit back then. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, this was 91.
Yeah.
And, or 92, I can't remember that. But we're like, well, we're screwed. What are we going to do? So we all decided in our infinite wisdom, well, let's just go down the border another 20 kilometers and try another border crossing. And sure, it was a much smaller road, much smaller border crossing. And the guy just waved us on through.
Nice.
I'm like, okay,
Perfect.
no problem. So we get to our hotel, get up in the morning. I come down. It's the early morning glide ratio thing going on, and I land. And one of the coordinators of the event comes over. He's like, Mr. Smith. I'm like, yeah. He goes, where's Herr Schneider? And I'm like, he's sleeping at the hotel. He's like, oh, we must go down right away. I'm like, what? And I look over, and there's these 3 guys with sidearms on their hips.
No
and they're
way.
from the Austrian
They
customs.
tracked you guys down?
So what they saw, I guess they had a camera at that, and they saw this our license plate, and they're like, "Yep." So they tracked us down.
Oh my God!
And I was like, "Oh man, Ernst is in a load of shite now." And I got there to Ernst. I was like, "Listen, tell them it was my fault. What are they going to do? Deport me?
Right.
And kick the American out? You're the one that needs to live here." So I think they might have given him a fine. But it ended up being okay. No jail time for Ernst or anything. But man, it's just like like I said before, I've never been denied entrance into a country before because I had too many paragliders.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. We're already ahead. I'm going to bring you back a little bit. So, 89, you go to Aconcagua, and I didn't know about all these mountaineering feats until I talked to Dick Jackson. I didn't know that part of your background, but before we started recording, you were telling me a bit about that. So you get hired to take somebody to fly off the top?
Yeah, it was a guy I was teaching to fly. He was from Boston, and his name was John Nordlinger. Great guy. Passed away from ALS a few years ago. Absolute bear of a man. But he hired me to teach him how to fly and also guide him to fly off Aconcagua. And then we also had Brian Becker with us. He was a mountaineering guide from Colorado. So the 3 of us went down there. But you needed a visa to get into Argentina, and Brian had been down there a couple times prior. He's already climbed Aconcagua before, but he didn't have a visa yet. And we're like, dude, you have to get your visa. And he's like, oh no, you can get it at the airport. And we're like, I don't think so. I mean, it says right here, black and white, you got to do it prior. Right. So sure enough, we were all supposed to rendezvous in Miami and then go from Miami to Buenos Aires. And so John and I are in Miami, and there's no Brian. And they wouldn't let him on the plane. We're out of Denver because he didn't have his visa for Argentina. I'm like,
Better to find out there than
yeah.
I've done it the other way. Get down to Brazil. Oh, you
Right.
need that? Oh, shit. Yeah, back to Copenhagen.
Yeah. So we just continued on. We're like, well, we have to continue. So we're in Buenos Aires for a while, and then Mendoza, and just basically waiting for Brian to get his paperwork sorted out. And so it was taking about a week. So we're hanging out at the hotel, and we end up meeting this reporter, and he introduced us to this guy that he knew who was involved with this hotel company down there. And we told them what we were going to do because we're going to climb Aconcagua and fly off of it. And I don't think it had been done at the time yet, maybe. And they're like, and they didn't know anything about paragliding really. This is 89, I think. And so they're like, they wanted to be involved. So they sponsored the entire expedition for us.
Really?
Yep.
Just
I mean, yeah, it was like great.
Wow, what a nice delay.
Yeah. So it actually was serendipitous that Brian didn't make it because otherwise we wouldn't have made those connections.
Wow.
So it just,
meant to be.
Lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, it worked out great. And, we had free lodging at this hotel and, we climbed Aconcagua and it turned into an epic. We don't need to go into it.
Oh, yes, we do.
No, it's just John wasn't feeling well, and just one thing led to another. I ended up losing the tips of my toes to frostbite. Went down a shoe size.
Really?
Yeah.
You lost parts of your feet?
Yeah, just 2 big toes.
Wow.
And so yeah.
I thought I knew you, Chuck.
Yeah. So, and but we survived. Put it that way.
Did you get to fly off it?
No.
Aconcagua
Got up
was
there,
windy.
windy,
Yeah.
like a lot of things. So yeah, and that's kind of what led. I mean, I think they cascade into one little thing leads to another, and before you know it, you're in a life-threatening situation. So it was, it was
Anybody else?
coldest
lose
nut of
parts?
my life coming down off that mountain. I tell you
Oh,
that.
God.
23,000 feet. Yeah, it was. I don't want to be that cold again.
Anybody with any kind of edema stuff? Any kind of
Yeah,
nauseous?
John was. He was suffering a bit from pulmonary edema. Pretty acute. Yeah.
Okay.
We got him down. Yeah, and luckily for me, the muleteers that we had, the arrieros, they were training a new horse to learn the route because it's about a 2-day,
Getting in there.
getting into base camp
Yeah.
and exiting base camp. And so I got to ride a horse out, and that's what saved my toes. Otherwise, I think I would have lost a lot more. So,
Really?
So I got to ride a horse out because there was multiple river crossings, and just 2 days of trekking. It would have beat the crap out of my toes. So that's what saved my toes to a horse. I wish I remembered that horse's name, because I feel guilty for not remembering. But that turned into then we ended up staying down there and working, doing promotion for that hotel company and promoting this Hombre Acero, this big like Ironman type of competition they were having. So we're traveling around the country, flying, and just promoting that. And just turned into
What a cool time of life where you can just there's no
Could stay
there's
away.
no agenda.
Yeah.
Just okay, we'll
Yeah.
stay here.
Yeah.
Ah, beautiful. Did you ever get to fly off it? Did you go back?
Nope. Never got to fly it.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
it's been done much.
Yeah.
Dick got off it, I think. I remember him for him,
Yeah,
but it wasn't the first time. I think he had to go back, or I can't remember.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the Andes. It's always windy.
Always windy.
But
yeah,
and that's what one thing I was bummed I never got to do while I was in New England. I never got to fly Mount Washington.
really.
Because it's a third of the year there. It's it's hurricane force winds are higher.
Yeah, I mean, the sailplane pilots fly and wave there.
Yeah, but I know John Bouchard flew it.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone else. Maybe Dave Carl did. I'm not sure if any of the other local guides up there in North Conway ever got to fly, but yeah, you had to choose, of course, the right day, get lucky.
Yeah.
But we all know it's all about the wind.
It's all about the wind. It's all about the weather.
Yes,
Why do we do these sports that are so dependent on the weather?
I know. So, what else is out there?
Yeah. What about this, the World Championships in Cosenz? I've heard a couple stories about that already, but Cosenz got a special place in my heart because we go through there, of course, on the X-Alps every year. I'm going to have another little nip of this gorgeous bottle of Glenlivet.
Yeah, well, I think Austria is so gorgeous. It's so incredibly green. The mountains are so beautiful. But got on the U.S. team. It was, see, Mark Shipman was kind of like our team doctor. It was John Bouchard, me, Mark Axon, Greg Smith, Ed Pittman. Who else was on the team? I know I'm forgetting somebody. But we it was Mark Axon and John and I were flying on ITV. That's when we kind of ITV came out with the Sapphire.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody knows that glider. That thing will wrestle you to the ground if it can. But it was.
I know I will not fly. I will not fly.
God, I still have it. It's in
Do
the
you
bag.
really?
I'm holding on to it. I mean,
That's
it hasn't been
awesome.
unfurled since 1991 or
Wow.
1990. But I want to take it out because it was such a cool glider. It had that checkerboard color pattern on it, and it was kind of delta shaped.
Yeah.
Had that swept back leading edge, and it was screened with valves in it, and and it had that little tail section, and it had, of course, the steer seat.
Yeah.
And at that time, we thought that was the way to go.
Right.
I was like, well, that makes
sense.
sense.
Yeah.
It's like a hang glider. You're changing your CG a bit. You're leaning, and you can steer your wing that way. But then, when you think about it, it doesn't make any sense. Because to go fast, you had to lean forward. So you're making your body totally perpendicular to the airflow,
Yes.
which is completely opposite of what you want when
Right.
you're trying to go fast.
Right.
And then, of course, in turbulence and the thing's just tossing you around. Yeah. So that was the times of the steer seat. But yeah, so we went, the three of us end up in on sea at the factory, picking up the glider and then flying over on sea. And, it was their test pilots. It's the Ali Gali and what's his name? Terry Babu.
Mm-hmm.
He's still around. They were the chief test pilots for ITV, and they were kind of walk us through the maneuvers and so on with it. I was just scared buttless. And but yeah, we went to the coast and we didn't do that well.
What was the comp? What did you have to do?
It was all XC courses,
Okay.
just like today.
Okay.
And,
Wow. But taking pictures and all that, but
yeah.
okay.
And yeah, but the weather wasn't that good in the finals. I don't think. I forgot what the hell, if they actually named a champion or not. Andre Bouchard was around back in those days. He was like the favorite. And that's another story. I don't know if you know about him getting arrested eventually.
No, tell it.
So, but Bouchard, I remember in the early morning, Bouchard, he was flying this huge glider, big and slow, but he would get an incredible glide ratio out of it. But I think they named Carlo Della Rosa or Della Rosso the actual champion. But I don't think they got enough tasks in to make it official.
Okay.
But yeah, Andre Bouchard, though, I mean, he was one of the biggest names in paragliding in Europe.
Sure.
And it was years later, I forgot how many years later, he and his girlfriend robbed a bank. I think he got into some financial issues and decided to rob a bank, I think in Germany or Austria. And they had one of those exploding dye pouches in there.
Oh,
so they had that
God.
in the car and it went off. And that's how they caught him. And he ended up serving some time in jail. I'm not sure how long. And then, but he just passed away from, I think, cancer not too long ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was this, when did you have your pound? Am I getting way ahead?
That was in April 25th, 1992.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
when I started my second life. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So we just finished. Yeah, we had just come back from Europe, come back from flying the World Cup in Japan. That was me and Greg and Mitch McAleer. That was really a cool experience at that competition.
So Mitch is flying paragliders already at the World Cup?
He was starting, and he was there doing some hang gliding demonstrations.
Oh, that's when he had the whole thing folded around him, right?
Was
Was that Japan
different.
trip?
That was a different trip.
Okay.
This one was
That's
really
a
cool.
good
I tell
story.
you, man, when that competition in Japan, I was looking at it fondly. I was like a rock star,
Yeah.
I mean, I was coming off of 91. I was the number one rated pilot that year. And so I'm in Japan, and they just love that stuff. I was giving autographs. I'm like, I like Japan. But
You don't get that.
talk
over
about
here.
high industrial flying. Now, man, they had us land in the city of Kyushu one time. Right? I mean, you're flying through these huge buildings into right downtown city.
Wow.
It was really cool. And then, but man, power lines everywhere. When you're out on flying, you're on your task, man. If you get, pushed up or, stuck on some ridge or some slope somewhere, trying to work your way back up, and you're just worrying about these giant power lines all the time.
Wow.
But one of the coolest things, and I tell you, Mitch McAleer, in my opinion, is the best hang glider pilot that's ever existed.
Yeah.
What his loops are ballet.
Oh my God, they're crazy.
When he does them, he knows right where he can take it
Yeah.
before he finishes the loop. Most people, they do the snap loops. Heine's really good, John Heine, but Mitch is he's out on his own. So the cool thing, we were at launch one day, and cloud base that morning was really low, and Mitch is on his hang glider, and he thermals up into the cloud, and you lose sight of him. and everybody's there at launch. There's hundreds of people, spectators, all kinds of, and all of a sudden he comes out of the bottom of the cloud in a full dive.
Just straight at the people.
Straight down. Well, he did that too. He did buzz to people at the launch. He had people jumping out of the way. It was cool, but he comes straight out of the bottom of the cloud, and then he commences his loop, and the apex of his loop goes back into the cloud again. So you can't see it. So you're watching him come in and out of the base of this cloud. Oh, it was just beautiful. I wish I had video of it, because somebody does, because there's all kinds of TV crews there. But it was just beautiful to witness. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Legend.
He is a legend.
Still is.
Still is.
Still is. You go out to California, you're like, there he is above my ass. How the hell's he doing it?
Yeah. No. Exactly.
Wow, cool. So at this point, are you more in UP design, admin, that world, or is it more competitions and more going around being a rock star?
I don't know. I had such multiple roles at UP. I mean, I originally went out there because they wanted to get a UP school going out at the point.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was just more of admin stuff, traveling around with Greg, building our dealer network, competition flying, and so it was just.
Were you really jazzing on that? I mean, it was competition fly. That was your thing.
Yeah, I was fired up.
Yeah,
fired up about competition at the time. I mean, I think a lot of pilots are.
Yeah.
I eventually lost that fire, and that's when I kind of found that tandem flying kind of fulfilled that void in a way.
We skipped it. So we were going down this road because of your accident. So with your
we had just done the Torrey Pines speed races.
What's that?
And so those were, I'm not sure how many years that went on. It was a couple, 2-3 years at least. So basically, we'd come off Torrey at the main launch. You flew down the coast, and you had two pilots launching simultaneously. One would turn right, one would go to the north, one would go to the south. You had a turn point, hit that turn point. They had judges there to make sure that you hit that turn point. Then you race back the other way, go to the other turn point, and then come back to the finish line.
Cool.
And so it was gliders racing together, but then it was whoever had the fastest time as well.
Yeah.
And then I think they'd go head to head in the end. I'm not sure exactly how that was structured, but it was a fun event. So at that time, it was, I think, spring of '92. Greg had already left UP. I was still there, and so I had my team, Bob Schick, and some other really hot pilots. And that's when we nearly. Here's another story.
Yes.
So
keep coming.
So Bob Schick and I decided it would be a great idea because we wanted to mess with Greg. We're best friends, but he was ADL.
Yeah.
At the time, and I hadn't left UP yet, and so it was a friendly little competition we had going on. So it was one night, Bob Schick and I decided, let's take one of these little smoke bombs, right? There was the ones with little canisters, with a little chain you pull.
Yeah.
And we'll mount it under Greg's car. And we'll tie a string to it. So when he's driving on his way to Torrey that morning, then hopefully the smoke bomb would be initiated, and he'd have all the smoke come out of the bottom of his car, and he would know it was up. All right, great, good plan. Okay. So it's in the middle of the night. We can't really see that well. I'm under one side of the car, I think tying the string to somewhere on the axle, I think, on rear axle. And Bob was putting the smoke bomb up in the bumper of Greg's vehicle. And it was a Mitsubishi Montero. So what we couldn't see in the darkness was that there was a wiring harness right next to where he put the smoke bomb. So we waited. we parked down the street from Greg's hotel room, and he
Just
was with his girlfriend.
Excited little kids going,
Oh,
yes,
yeah,
can't
excited.
wait.
It's gonna be so much fun. Couldn't mess with our buddy. And he was with his girlfriend Lisa Halls and Christoph Kirsch, who was the European paragliding champion at the time.
Okay.
And so they're in their vehicle riding, and we're riding behind them, and nothing happens. We're like, all right. So we break off to go get some breakfast. A little later, we go to Tori, and then Greg pulls in. He's like, okay, who's the smart ass? And we're like, here. Well, what happened, which we didn't witness, is I think the string was slipping on the axle, and that's why it finally engaged after we had left. And so the smoke bomb, the heat from it, ignited the wiring harness, the plastic on it. So it was on fire. Flames are shooting up. And so Greg explained the story to us. It was like, yeah, we're riding down the road. Smoke comes out. You didn't really see it. But then the flames start shooting up from the rear bumper, and they're right next to the gas station, the gas tank. And Christoph Kirsch is crying, Feuer! German. But, luckily, and it was a cool thing. Greg, he was prepared. He had a fire extinguisher in his vehicle, and he put it out. And but man, I was in tears because I was like, we nearly killed Greg and the European champion and Lisa all in one fell swoop. I mean, had we ignited the gasoline tank or something? But that car never rode again correctly. They replaced the wiring harness and stuff, but Greg said, "Oh yeah, the electronics on it were always screwed up." Oh, man, I'm sorry. Duh.
Sorry, man.
Yeah. So I think maybe that was
really funny.
Yeah. So it was literally a week after that when I was passing through Reno, unveiling kind of our new stuff, and it was still a prototype. I was on the new Flash because we hadn't quite finished the final testing with the DHV, and I was out there at Peavine, it was mid-morning, and just coming in to land, and wrong place at the wrong time, man.
It was a Dust Devil, right?
Dust Devil, yep. And there's a theory. Who was it there? Anyway, people said, well, there was an earthquake at the time. I said, well, that earthquake was me hitting the ground.
Yeah, right.
But they said, no, there was actually a tremor that went through.
Which you have a lot in Reno. I mean,
Yep.
that
and I
part
think
of the
that
world.
might have triggered the Dust Devil.
Wow.
Because there were some other people up higher, and they all reported like a couple minutes after I impacted, and they were up 1,000 feet or more, that they all hit all this turbulence at the same time. So it might have been all these multiple,
Really?
warm air dust devils triggering off. It's a theory.
Yeah. I mean,
But, yeah.
I grew up in that part of the world, and I mean, my parents used to, you're a kid, you sleep through all that stuff, but they,
Yeah.
there's a lot of tremors in that. You're right on the fault line.
Yep.
And it's not that out there to think that could have done that. That's wild.
Yeah.
So you were how
Either
far
way,
off?
so
How far off the ground when you?
60, 70 feet.
And you
But
straight
that glider, as you can imagine, it was, it's on video. And I can see, I might over control it a bit. It stalled. I couldn't control the surge because it was upside down. I was just getting thrashed. So the glider and I hit the ground at the same time.
Wow.
So I basically just flew it.
You were flying.
Just as it was surging, I was hitting the ground, and yeah, I was out.
So there's no canopy over your head. You were
Nope.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
accelerated
you were
into the
free
ground,
falling.
and I was out. And I got.
And what are you in? Are you? I mean, what was the harness? What was the? Was there any protection?
Nah.
Yeah, you were back in that. Okay.
No. But I rearranged my insides pretty good, and collapsed a lung. And I got to say, I probably got to credit like Bill Anderson with help, and this other guy, what's his name? Last name was Fraser. But really, Bill, thank you, Bill, for saving my life.
Really?
Yeah, because they got to me, and I was turning blue.
Because you couldn't breathe.
Yeah. And so I think one lung was already collapsed. And of course, I didn't know that at the time. But I think my airway was a bit obstructed with my insides that were all kind of moved up. and they put a board under my back and sat me up a little bit. And that, I think, released a little bit of that pressure off my airway. And I could at least, breathe on one lung.
What was broken?
Well, I herniated my stomach, colon, and bowel up through my diaphragm.
Jesus.
So I take your things from kind of your lower area and shove it up into your chest. So yeah, really didn't break anything. It was just to move the insides around.
Good God, you're a wombat, man.
Yeah, and the doc, I gotta say it, Myron Gomez. I will never forget his name. He was the emergency doctor that sliced me down the middle and put everything back to where it needed to be. And I wrote him.
You were really disorganized in there.
Yeah.
Holy shit! They had to open you up.
Yeah, they sliced me down the middle and put things back to where they needed to be.
Good God.
But yeah, so
92. How
yep.
were you?
So I don't know, like 29. I guess, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but ICU for a few days, hospital for a week, recovered in Reno for a bit, and then I made myself fly at 5 weeks. It hurt, but I made myself fly just to get back on the horse. I was like, I got to get back in the air.
Yeah.
And I knew it wasn't like, oh, gee, I'll never fly again or something. It's like I analyzed it, and I knew what happened. It's just one of those things. Move on, but yeah, you get yourself in the air and make yourself fly again, which I did.
Was that scary?
It was uncomfortable physically, but not mentally.
Okay.
Felt good.
Yeah.
And then that's when some more things were changing at UP when I started getting back into.
Was that your first crash?
Yeah. I had some minor little ones before, but that was
the normal stuff.
Yeah, that was the first time I'd really messed myself up.
Okay.
It's just minor little things. I've never,
okay,
had anything real bad. But, yeah. Then I decided, I don't, I think I'm going to move on from UP. It was a tough decision to make. But, so I ended up going to Aspen and helping them develop their tandem program there with Jan Stensifold and Dick Jackson. So, yeah.
And that was right after the accident?
Yep, did that summer, and then that autumn, Greg and I got together because we were like because he was full on with Adel, and we worked great together. Greg was just awesome, and so he and I started kind of reconnoitering all around the West to find a location where we could have a flight school and like a demo center. And a place where he could also base the import business, Adel. And we landed in Sun Valley. So we started Sun Valley paragliding together. He had Adel. And
what year is this?
93-ish.
Oh,
going
wow.
into, yeah. So then, so flying had going on here at Sun Valley for quite a while. Ed Simon, he was the president of the club, and they started, in 89 or 90. So they had recreational flying going on here for, several years, but nothing commercial. So when we came in, we had to negotiate, and we'll start the process of getting a permit from the Forest Service to operate up on the ski resort here. And that was taking a long time because it just hadn't existed yet.
Right.
So months and months, I think it was 8-10 months had gone by. And it was just like, financially it wasn't working for me, So I ended up going back to Aspen and working with them again. And Greg kept the business here with the Adel, and and he had by the time he got the permit, I was already in partnership with Dick and Aspen.
And was a big part of your business back then? Is it instruction? Is it selling stuff, or is it tandems?
Yeah, both.
Okay.
Before I left Sun Valley, it was instruction.
Okay.
Basically, but kind of clandestine teaching here and there because we still didn't have a permit, to operate.
Yeah.
But need to do something. But then back in Aspen, it was probably 60-70% tandems and the rest instruction.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, like I said, by the time Greg got, we got the permit here, I just said, Greg, you just keep Sun Valley paragliding. I'll stay in Aspen.
Okay.
And then that goes on to the next chapter.
So Ed Simon's flying here. I mean,
Ed Simon was here.
There's a lot of names
Bob
in this place.
Frostenson, Hans Hub. He was teaching up here.
Okay.
He's still around, I think. He doesn't fly. Yeah, he's ancient, but he was probably the first person to fly off a Baldy.
Really?
Paraglider was Hans Hub, yeah. And then he taught Ed Simon how to fly and some other folks, but he never really had a formal school or anything like that. So that's why we were worried before we came up here initially with Sun Valley Paragliding with Greg and I. We didn't want to step on any toes.
Yeah.
But it seemed like the place to be. We'd already been here for a competition the year earlier. That Paul Potters and Garth Callahan and Ed, they were, I think, part of the organization of that. It was a pretty good comp. But that's how we first got introduced to Sun Valley. We were looking at this place. We were looking at Steamboat Springs and a few other locations, and we landed at Sun Valley. And that's why we started calling and saying, hey, we don't want to step on toes if we come up here and start a business or like in a school or anything. And they're like, no, come on up. What Hans is doing isn't anything formal. So, yeah.
And, before my time here, there's just a string of names from this place. Dave Bridges and Will Gadd and Chris Santa Croce. I mean, Santa Croce back when he was in his teens, right? I mean,
yeah. I think I took Chris on his first tandem.
Really?
I think so.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
that's
out at the point.
incredible.
Well, I remember when I was working for UP. And we were at the point, and Chris had his mobile home out there. I'm like, who is this kid? And it was cool.
Back in the freaky days.
Yeah, man. But he just took off, man. He just had the skills, and boom. Man.
Robbie Whittle?
Right. Yeah, Robbie Whittle was here. Yeah, there was a window of time there after I left, and Greg still had the business here. Yeah, that's exactly what he had. Dave Bridges up here, Robbie Whittle, Mitch McAleer.
Mitch was here?
Mitch was here for a short time too, yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, look at that roster of pilots, man.
Yeah.
And Santa Croce was here with him. I mean, it's like he was, it's like the dream team.
Yeah,
But,
incredible.
Yeah. But unfortunately, I think, Greg got into substance abuse and never really put that much energy into the school and the tandem aspect of things. He was still, doing stuff with Adel, importing and making a bundle of money. Because Adel was the biggest market share at the time.
Well, and substance abuse back then was kind of the go here anyway, because it wasn't ski areas.
Yeah, nope. It tends to happen in those ski towns.
Yeah. So how long were you in Aspen?
About 8-9 years, almost 10 years.
And it was you and Dick.
Yeah,
After-
I worked for Dick and Jan.
Yeah.
And then when they split, I became partners with Dick.
Right.
And those were some good years. That's when I was doing quite a bit of cross-country flying, which I enjoyed. And then...
and they were having a lot of comps and stuff out there in Aspen of the day.
Yeah, in the latter part there,
Yeah.
in the latter 90s, we had the Red Bull over, wings over Aspen. Those were some really good comps. And we had all the Euros coming over, and I was still competing. I was then competing tandem against solo pilots, which was fun.
Wow. Really?
But, yeah. I try something new.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, we had a huge disadvantage, but it was still fun.
Right.
And I did this TV show with ESPN one time with Bart Connor. He's the gold medal gymnast.
Yeah.
And he flew a day in the comp with me as as my navigator. And we did that part of that show. But the cool thing with that little segment that we did, it was called Action Zone, this TV show. But I got to fly with Nadia Comaneci, his wife,
Right.
who's, best gymnast.
Yes.
And they were such nice people.
Cool.
Incredible. I mean, the both of them are at the apex of their sport, and they are the most humble, nicest people you ever meet. Yeah, that was really an honor. And really eye-opening, too, talking to her about because she's Romanian, Eastern European, under the
Yeah.
behind the great
Before the Berlin Wall.
the block, yeah,
of course.
and that was how one of the ways you would become successful in the Eastern Bloc or in those communist countries at the time. Either you become a party member or you became like a phenomenal athlete.
Yeah.
I'm like,
and there was money for the athletes.
yep.
Yeah.
And I was talking to her about it. It's like, wow, it had to be pretty amazing or just interesting. Or it was like, well, how did it all work? And because you were the perfect 10.
Yeah.
You were the first gymnast to get a perfect 10. You were the most famous gymnast in the world. And she says it was horrible.
Yeah.
Because Ceausescu, he was the leader of Romania. He despised her because she was more popular than him.
Whoa.
Typical
Bullshit.
Tyrant dictator,
Yeah. God.
And so he made her live in a home. He lived in a palace right there in Budapest, and so, or Bucharest, sorry. And he made her live in a house just outside his palace and had his secret police watch her all the time.
Jesus.
And then she told me how she escaped.
Fucking egos.
Oh yeah, but it was interesting how she escaped. They got into Hungary, and she told me how they had to go over these mountains in the middle of the night, like waist deep snow, just trudging through there to get out of there. And yeah, pretty amazing.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, the Aspen days were some good days. And
the characters you must have met. I mean, that was,
oh yeah,
days and just...
yeah. And I know Dick told you the story when he took Maurice Herzog flying. Yeah, and Dave Bridges and I ran him down the sled because, of course, he couldn't run because it's got stumps now. But yeah, that was a special day being part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, wow, first guy to climb an 8,000-meter peak, and yeah. And then just awesome days working with Dave Bridges.
Yeah.
I can't remember when Dave left Sun Valley and came down to Aspen. I don't know exactly when, but man, talk about, he was 2-time national champion, phenomenal pilot, and just incredible athlete.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. I mean,
Beast.
when he was going on that expedition to Shishapangma, when he got killed with Alex Lowe, I was strength training with him.
Really?
And, I could keep up with him in that at the time. But when he would go up the mountain, I'm like, see ya. He was just a lungs.
Beast.
Lungs with 2 legs. Unbelievable.
An earlier killing Journey kind of guy. Just
phenomenal. I just
heart of a
him,
muscle.
man, you come home. You make sure you come home. And he didn't, but yeah, that was a huge loss, to the flying community in the United States.
Yeah.
There's been a few of those people, like Bob England. If he was still around, I don't know if he was a phenomenal pilot. And of course Greg and Dave and some of these people that were just phenomenal in our community, and I don't know what it'd be like if they were still around.
Yeah. Kiwi was like that. I mean, you wouldn't put him up there with the phenomenal, level pilot, but what a phenomenal mind and person, and just character. We've got a lot of those in this.
There's characters in New Shore.
There's characters, yeah.
A lot of alpha.
Chuck, tell me about Hobbs. So, I've got a real affinity for Larry Tudor. Hearing about him, when he was back in his record chasing days, the Dark Prince and Larry, what the fuck are you doing? What do you mean? There's a tornado, man, and some of that kind of stuff. But Hobbs is. I've only flown there once. Coming back from Texas a couple years ago, when we were chasing it down there, we just had to stop because of the Larry stories, and I flew Hobbs, and it was a good day. Wasn't a great day, but that's a neat place. But what was that all? What was that scene?
Yeah, that was all with UP when I was working there. So they sent us down there for 2 weeks to go do record, attempts. Mark Axon was with us as the official observer, And it was me and Greg and Matsuo from Japan. He was a character, man.
Yeah.
He ended up dying in a car wreck in Thailand. But and then I think there was another German pilot there. But it was all with UP. It was cool, getting paid to go fly distance,
Yeah.
try to bring in, and then so Greg I ended up putting in a lot of miles those 2 weeks, but I never got the record. If you added up all my miles, I had huge. But yeah, and the one day when Greg got the record, I think it was 63 miles at the time. That's the day I sunk out. Like,
Of course.
Damn it anyway, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But it was really cool. We were towing up at that airstrip down there. And we never got the optimum conditions we needed, the way that the dry line set up. But we still had some pretty good flying. But I remember one day, so I don't know if I'd met Larry before that or not. But we were at the hotel one afternoon, and the car pulls in, and Larry gets out, and he's just covered in cow shit. And so I guess I think he was on a paraglider. Yeah, had to be. Yeah, and he wasn't part of our team there. I think he was just there for his own personal fun or whatever. I'm not sure, but he had landed in a stockyard and got drug in the high winds. Just
Right
pulled
through
him right through all the cow dung, and he just was covered. I'm like, dude, sorry. Yeah. But yeah, it was windy. I remember constantly landing backwards.
Yeah.
So I just spin around, and steer the glider in, looking over my shoulder and steering it with the rear risers and stuff like that. So.
You said earlier there was the first life, second life, the post-accident. How did your own flying style approach, what changed?
Probably subconsciously. I mean, probably just not as fired up as I used to be. It's hard to say. I still flew some competitions after that, but not nearly as much.
Okay.
But, I stopped flying comps, I guess, in late 90s, 96, 97, somewhere in there. Maybe 98 was the last time. Yeah, just lost that fire, But like I said before, it's, the tandem flying kind of became a new project after that.
Yeah, and see this is something I've never done. I've taken people tandem. I have tandem kit, but I've never been a commercial tandem pilot. I'm not rated. But when we all got together this summer for Evan's wedding, and we had a lot of good pilots out here.
Yeah.
You're so fired up. I mean, It's just have you loved it like that the whole time?
I loved it. I loved the camaraderie.
Yeah.
It was back then it was a really small community.
Yeah.
And it's still pretty small these days.
Yeah.
So I like that camaraderie and that friendly kind of competition, But and just getting that feeling, getting fired up for, getting out there and after it. But yeah.
When did you transition here and started the tandem business here? What year was that?
So I came here in 2000.
Okay.
Spring of 2000. Yep.
From Aspen?
Yeah, I was not directly, wasn't the plan.
Okay.
I sold my shares of the business in Aspen, and I got engaged and at the time, and I was becoming an innkeeper. Yeah. And my significant other at the time, she came in from restaurant management and stuff like that, and she really wanted to become an innkeeper, so we bought this Victorian mansion, sea captain's mansion up in Maine, on Deer
Whoa.
Isle. Yeah, and
She went back home.
So yeah, almost. And I was going to open a sea kayak business with it. I wanted to run tours between inns. I thought it'd be a really cool, thing to offer. But that just it blew up. I chose the wrong woman. We never got married, but Yeah, she had a plan I didn't know about.
Okay.
But I will tell you 100% that ghosts exist.
Really?
100%.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a 22-room mansion. I'm there in the winter on an island in Maine.
Are we going to some Shining shit here?
I was
I'm
just
already
gonna
getting
say
freaked out,
it
man.
was like The Shining. It was just me and the ghosts in that thing.
Whoa.
And yeah.
You don't strike me as someone that believes in this kind of stuff either.
No,
This
man,
is- whoa.
without a doubt, ghosts exist.
Whoa, spooky, man.
Yeah. So then, but that old thing blew up, and so then I just found myself like, well, what do I do now? And that's when the Forest Service up here were accepting applicants for the concession on the mountain. By that time, Greg had lost the business here; he was long gone.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I got nothing else to do, so I put in for it. And here we are.
Wow.
20 odd years later,
24
man.
years.
Yeah, it was just didn't expect it, but I love it up here.
And you enjoy the tandems. I mean, to me, it's a big, powerful place.
It's a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, I would.
You
just
know, and
think
it's a whole
I'd be
new
nervous as
dynamic.
shit doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what you're going to get. There's 90% of the time, it's friggin' awesome. I love it. But there's the times where I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
You know? But there's times too that it's pretty magical. And I got to be part of at least 3 or 4 times now of end-of-life flights where I've taken people where their last dream or what they want to do before they die is go fly.
Really, this is kind of a bucket list thing. There,
Yep.
That's it. Wow.
So I took a guy years ago. He had ALS. Once again, I think it's the most evil disease you could ever get because your brain is perfect.
Yeah.
Your thoughts are perfect. You know, you're totally cognitive. Your brain just can't communicate with the rest of your body.
Oh God.
It's like being in a mannequin in a body or something. But so I had that guy. He checked out a month after I took him flying.
Whoa.
That was his dream. It was one of his last things he wanted to do. I took a woman here a few years ago. She had Parkinson's. Similar thing. She couldn't speak because especially with ALS, his latter parts, he couldn't speak. He couldn't move his arms. He couldn't move his legs. Basically quadriplegic. But the eyes will tell you everything.
Wow.
Yeah. I have a hard time talking about it, man.
Yeah.
Because I get emotional thinking about it because it's all in those people's eyes. And they can't talk, but they can still smile, and their eyes are just lit up.
They're still getting it.
Yep. And being part of that, that's what makes it really special.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I had a few of those. And then, there was one time too.
Is it that stuff that just keeps you fired up about it?
Yeah.
Or is it just
Yep.
because you kind of seem fired up about it anyway?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah, but it's those extra special ones where
Yeah.
it really gives it meaning.
Yeah.
And always remember, too, there was one time there was this little 10-year-old girl I took flying. And the dad said, hey, she's really introverted and, she's not going to say much. And we took her flying. And she was very demure and so on. But he called me up, I think the next day or 2 days later. It's just like, Chuck, thank you.
Really?
It's changed my little girl. She's come out of her shell. It's amazing, the transformation. I'm like, what? Like a
Really?
paragliding flight? And I guess it just totally changed her. And
Wow.
I was like, wow, this is really cool to be part of. That yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah.
That's really precious.
So, yeah. And then there's the other ones when you get puked on.
Yeah. Well, and you got to take the Playboy girls up one time.
the
you know?
Playboy, that was
looked pretty fun.
That was a fun gig. I gotta say, that was a good day at the office. I'll never forget that one. I was flying back east, and I'm at Boston Airport, and checking my voicemails on my phone, and waiting for my luggage to come out. And I get there's this message. Hey, this is so and so from so and so production company, and we'd really like to talk to you. I'm like, okay. So I called them right away. And I'm like, what's going on? He goes, yeah, well, we do this show. And he goes, would you guys object to flying with women that were, topless and most likely naked? I'm like, yeah, twist my arm a little bit more.
That'd be okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
so that was a fun gig. It was for the Playboy channel called Badass. They have a show called Badass on there. So yep, we took him flying.
How many of them was there?
There was 3.
They looked like they had a blast.
Yeah.
I've watched those a couple times.
Yeah, and then when they left us, we flew that morning. I kept it under wraps. I hardly told anybody.
Right.
Because I'm like, I got so many calls from 10 pilots all over the place. You SOB, why did you tell me? Like, yeah, exactly. Because every swinging,
right.
What's going to be showing up. I'm like, I got to keep this under, because I didn't talk to anybody about it.
Right.
And we parked our Suburbans, kind of the 3 of them, in the kind of crescent shape, so that we could kind of, people could see something was going on in the landing zone, because we landed and go right behind the Suburbans.
Right.
And people could tell something was going on, but they couldn't quite tell what, unless they got a little closer. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here, where we've just covered decades of amazingness, but craziest thing you've ever seen in sport?
Oh, man. The craziest thing. I don't know. Man, oh, man.
And you can think about it. Remember, we got
think about
here,
it. But one of the coolest things,
even better,
when which I think is kind of unique. It's not crazy. At the World Cup in Japan, which I still the organization of that thing was awesome. But at the end, Uli Wiesmeyer won the comp, and we had this ceremony, the award ceremony, and they brought him out this green blazer like they do during the Masters in golf.
Yeah,
and he had $10,000 in cash in this pocket.
What?
Of the blazer. I'm like, that's the most I've ever known of anybody getting paid in
this
comp.
sport for sure.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
And let me see if I can think of something really crazy. Yeah. I don't know.
I love all the names here on your list. It's just incredible. I mean,
I can tell you.
At one point I figured, Chuck, I was doing the math. That this is no longer the case, but I think in my first or second X Alps, it was something like 70% of the U.S. athletes who had competed since the very beginning. The U.S. athletes in the X Alps had either cut their teeth here or spent time here.
Yes. Yep.
Hansa, Mitch, Nate, me.
Yep.
I mean, and I'm missing several. Will Gadd, of course. He was in the first. That's kind of a neat
No, I
place.
think that's. I mean, I noticed that year. I was like, yeah, look at that.
Yeah,
look at the
Willie,
Sun Valley.
There you go. There's Willie.
Yeah, the Sun Valley connection to the X Alps for the U.S. is
pretty wild.
Yeah.
Anyway, I cut you off what you were thinking about there, but
no,
it's a special place.
Yeah, it is. No, I don't know any other flying location in North America where more records
They just
been
keep
set
going down
and reset, and they're still here, a couple.
Yeah,
and
just got
just
the got the FAI last summer.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice going, Galen.
Yeah.
Awesome flight.
That was awesome.
I know farmers all fired up.
Yeah, we're all fired up. Yeah, we got to get back. Get back to the locals.
Yeah, but the amount of talent of pilots that have gone through here, it's
pretty remarkable.
Yeah, it is remarkable.
Yeah, it's really neat. Tell me about Ghana. This has been your gig for how long?
Yeah, Ghana's been an awesome experience. I fell into it. I started doing it in 2006.
Really?
So I got an email from Matt Gertis. He said it was like a email he sent out to all the ozone dealers saying, "Hey, there's this festival in Ghana, and they're looking for tandem pilots, and it's a free trip to Africa. You just go there and fly." And I'm like, that sounds cool. So it's only like 10 days before the festival, I think, by the time I reached out. And I sent an email, and it was Walter Messer, who's now one of my best buddies.
Yeah.
Walter's phenomenal pilot, climber.
Flew for you for a while here. And
Yeah, he spent some summers here flying. And
I spent some time at his house on our way to Malawi to do that whole gig. Yeah.
So he's
I mean, his whole thing with raptors
yes.
is awesome.
Yeah. His knowledge of birds and so
Oh my God.
So and but he's in Israel these days.
Really?
He's sent me a
He's not in South Africa anymore?
Nope.
Oh wow.
No, he left South Africa not that long ago, but he's been in Israel for a while. I was actually going to go work with him a few years ago, right there during COVID, and work with him at APCO.
Oh wow.
But it was just going to be a 2 or 3 month gig, but I couldn't get into the country.
Yeah.
Israel kept shutting their borders down.
Right.
But he sent me a WhatsApp message a couple weeks ago with the missiles flying overhead. And the Patriot missile interceptors. I'm like, man, get inside.
Yeah.
It's going to fall down on your head. But yeah, so I reached out. I didn't know Walter at the time in 2006. So I reached out to him. I'm like, hey, listen, it's probably too late for me to come to this Ghana thing, but please keep me in mind for next year. He's like, oh no, we got time. We'll get you here. So we met, had a great time, and been friends ever since. And then he got so busy, I think it was about 5 years later. He was getting so busy with the Raptors in his facility in South Africa.
Yeah.
That he just couldn't do the Ghana organization anymore. And so Sabrina Kerwin took over.
Oh, wow.
About a year. And we had a lot of pilots that year. We had Becca and Cade and, oh man, I forgot. Yeah, it was a big year. And then I don't know if it was a good fit for Sabrina. So that's when Ed Stein, my buddy from California, and he's a longtime pilot, one of the old guard.
Yeah.
He and I had been doing the gig because when I first got in 2006, when I first found out about it, it was I told Ed about it. I'm like, hey man, let's go why don't you come with me to Ghana? I'm doing this gig. And so he and I have taken over the organization of it for at least for the pilots. We're not the hosts or anything. The hosts are the Ministry of Tourism and the Ghana Tourism Authority. And so what they do is they tell us how many pilots they want and what's going to happen. Then Ed and I build the team, the national team.
And you're just taking locals for flights, right?
So what it is, it's a paying gig for people pay to take the flights, but that money goes back to the organization and the overhead of running the event.
Okay.
So I got a hand. I don't know how Walter did it because the whole started because Walter was there working on telecom towers, and he was up there on top of this because it's a escarpment that they have, and in this area called Kwau, and it's where everybody goes to celebrate Easter. So he somehow convinced the government and got it like, hey, let's cut a swath in the forest here. We'll make a launch site for paragliding. And so now it's become the integral part of the country's Easter celebration.
Oh, wow.
Go figure.
Yeah.
I don't know anything else like it in the world, man, where you have a government sponsoring a paragliding event like this. And it's at Easter. So it's like the rising of Christ, the resurrection of Christ to paragliding. Go figure.
Whoa.
But everybody goes to this region in Ghana to celebrate Easter. It's like if you want to celebrate Mardi Gras, you go to New Orleans. If you want to celebrate Carnival, you go to Rio.
Yeah.
So this is where people go to celebrate Easter. The rest of the year, this area is quite quiet, quite slow. But at Easter, it's insane. It just turns into street parties and dancing and music. Nothing happens without music there.
Yeah.
And so, and they love Americans. The Ghanaian people are so hospitable, and they're just ready to just party and have fun and enjoy themselves.
Wow.
And so the festival, people pay. The money goes back to the government to cover the overhead. So for the pilots, it's basically a free trip. Okay. Everything's paid for. Your airline, your lodging, all your food, everything's paid for.
It's a cool trip.
And a cool trip. Ed and I get paid a small amount because we actually
You run it.
run it,
Yeah.
put together the team. It's a lot of, a lot of international paperwork, stuff like that. But
And how big is the team? How many pilots do you need?
it varies. The most we've had, I think, is about 14 or 15
Oh, wow.
1 year.
And are you flying all day? Is it that
All
kind of
day.
site? Wow.
All day doing
So it's
laps.
interlocking. It's just go.
Just doing laps.
Wow.
And like 85% of your flights there are soarable. It's that equatorial air.
Yeah.
Big soft edges on the thermals and
Laminar, nice.
And they'd like us to work faster because
Right,
it
but it's so
generates
good.
more.
Yeah.
But man, you get in the air because it's so hot and humid.
Yeah.
It takes you a while to get used to it. I mean, you just think about leaning over to tie your shoe and you break into a sweat. So, so that's why when you're in the air, it's just feels great. You can get the cloud base.
How many tandems are you doing a day?
Well, depends who you are.
Yeah, right.
If you're Okada from Japan, he'll do probably 30% more than the rest of us. He's just, we call him Okada Kikai. It means the machine
Yeah.
in Japanese.
Right.
And, but I'll do, 7 or 8 usually. Okada might do 10, 11, 12. Most of us are all in the, Blake Pelton, he's out there a lot.
Oh, cool.
He comes there a lot with us. We've got a core.
How long do you typically go out for? Just a few weeks?
The festival's like 3-4 days.
Oh, okay.
Starts on the Friday before Easter. So that's a half day Friday because I have the opening ceremony and stuff. Then Saturday's a full day. Easter Sunday's a full day, and then usually a half day on Monday, on the Easter Monday. But I'll stay there for a while.
Yeah.
And Ed and I have been working on establishing some sort of instructional program there.
I was going to say, are
School.
there any of their local pilots or local people?
Yep, there's some locals now flying, and they need more. We want to get it. It's typical government, bureaucrats and red tape.
Yeah.
But we're really trying to get them to make a serious effort to get more of a school established there. And but their first pilot was Jonathan Quay, and I took him tandem on the first time I was there in Ghana
In 2006.
2006, and I still have the picture from our flight.
Wow.
And I always remembered it because I forgot how old he was. He looked like he was 12, but I think he was like 20 something. And we got up, I don't know, Cloud Bay, a couple thousand over launch, and he turned to me. He goes, "It's cold." You're the first person ever to say those words in Ghana, ever. And so we started teaching him a bit, ground handling and so on. And then but we could only do so much with him because our time there is finite. And so then he finished his master's degree, and so he's got some income coming into him. And he took it upon himself, and he went to India and got his pilot rating there, his first certification. And so he was gone as very first certified paraglider pilot.
License pilot.
And then now he's their very first tandem pilot. So he's doing tandems with us. So it's so cool. Like,
that's really cool.
You know,
You
it's
took
come
him on
full
his
circle.
first. Yeah.
And there's some other, I think there's maybe 4 other pilots, Ghana solo pilots.
Mm-hmm.
One lives in Switzerland. One lives here in California. So, but there's a few that still live in Ghana locally, but they all show up usually for the festival. So it's such a cool, just the whole energy of the event. I don't know any festival like it.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, they got live music and dancers and just, and it's just the respect that they show for paragliding there is really unique.
That's very
really
cool.
fun.
Yeah. You don't feel like the dirtbag that we usually.
Yeah, we're still dirtbags.
We're still dirtbags, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a good thing. That's a Yvonne Chenard. Being a dirtbag is a good thing, but that's cool to have the respect for it. That's pretty neat. Most people, I've done that down in Cozumel. No, it's not. It's not parasailing. That's not what I do.
Nope, exactly. Yeah, and it's amazing because they know exactly when you say paragliding. They
They understand.
People all over the country. They know what it is.
Yeah,
They
wow.
don't mistake it with parasailing.
And that's
they
not the
call
case
it-
here.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not the case. You know,
To
get
this
on
day,
the floor, people don't know what the hell you're
to
talking
this
about.
day, it's still parasailing. No.
Right.
And the other thing I think it's kind of subtle that I think is pretty cool. In most places they say, well, a paraglider did this, a paraglider did that. And well, no, the paraglider is the
Right.
the object, the
Yes.
inanimate object in that bag over there.
Right, right. Like Kanga says, the cold air balloon.
Yeah.
Right.
But there they call you pilots. They're like, oh yeah, here are the pilots, or the paraglider pilots.
Oh,
And
cool.
so it's pretty cool that they recognize the difference.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some expertise here. There's
Yeah, you got
there's some knowledge. There's
The
some
correct lexicon. Yeah.
Right. Oh,
So-
very cool.
Yeah.
Chuck, I haven't asked this in maybe a couple of years. I used to ask this question all the time with all my guests because I just liked it. But anyway, I don't do it much anymore. But with you, it's totally appropriate because there's so much time.
I don't
so
know
many
the
things
meaning of
here.
life.
Exactly. Yeah, Will's was the best. His answer was, you get to do it all over again, but you know where I'm going here. But if you could rewind the clock to your 50-hour self, so somewhere in that 86, 87, somewhere in there, you're back in Cape Cod and you're launching off stuff for 6 minutes, that kind of thing. Somewhere early on, now, today you could go back and talk to that Chuck.
Chuck.
What would you tell him? This is a hard one.
Don't not recognize the important moments, in your flying career, I think. There's times when I look back, I'm like, yeah, I should have done something a little different there. Because I always wondered, all right, if I would have stayed with certain things, would I have been designing gliders, working more manufacturing, things like that. I don't know. But, I'd say just don't ignore the important moments. Sometimes the important moments in your life, you don't recognize them. So, yeah. But, and similar to that, sometimes I look back, if I had stayed in school, had I taken a different path, I don't know. It would have been aviation involved, I think, for sure.
Right.
I look back, and nothing against. It's been an incredible ride. And paragliding has been it's been a vehicle to see the world. For you.
Yeah.
I don't need to
100%.
tell you that.
Yeah.
It's been just a phenomenal ride, an incredible journey. And then I'm like, would I trade it in? Would I for something else? Is the grass greener somewhere else? I don't know. But sometimes I look back, I'm like, well, Naval Academy maybe would have been cool, and eventually become an astronaut. I think about that. And I look
serious
back,
aviation.
would I do it? And I'd love to walk on the moon. And I don't know if I would seriously, but if it involves trading my 30, almost 40 years of paragliding just to walk on the moon, I think I'd do it. I don't know. It's hard to say. Because it's, like I said, it's been an incredible venture, but I think walking on the moon would just be life-altering.
I think it would. Yeah.
Who knows? Yeah. Anyway.
Well, we've got a group of people coming over here in a few minutes to celebrate what you've done here, and we're going to tap more into this beautiful bottle of Glenlivet.
Yeah, 18-year-old.
Oh God,
From the Highlands.
It's been gorgeous. I'm trying to stay away from it now, but Chuck, you're a legend. We really appreciate you. What you've done here over the decades is amazing. You have led the way and held a lot of people's hands, and appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
appreciate your
you,
stories,
man. What you're doing here, and you and Nate and Farmer and Hans and all those credible flights that have been done here, and even like sleepers like Carell, out there are just busting it.
Yeah,
it's special, and it's been really special to be part of everybody.
It has been. It's a special
deal
place.
here. Yeah.
It's a really unique place. I get to see a little bit of it through the eyes of the World Cup pilots that came down. My first big event here was the World Cup here in 2012, but running one this time down in Utah and seeing these Europeans who we hold in such regard.
Yeah.
Them seeing this terrain, Utah's just like Idaho, and they're just going, wait, what?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's special. It's unique. It's special. Yeah. Chuck, thank you, man. I appreciate you. Thank you for everything you've done and led the way.
Here, man.
What a great bunch of stories, and what a list of people. I mean, look at this. You look at all these people out here.
I've been, like I said,
you're a lucky man.
I've been so fortunate just to walk with giants, fly with giants. So, yeah.
Love you, dude. Awesome. Thank you, man.
Thanks, you.
If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind the scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription. And it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do, and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you're being in a position someday to be able to support us. But you'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account, and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.